Hello, everyone. I'm Linda Nickell, and welcome to the Happiness Hour, a weekly photography webinar that helps photographers from all over the country to connect, inspire, and create. My guests share tips, techniques, and the stories behind their photographs that inspire us to improve our own photography skills. The schedule for upcoming presentations is on my website at lindanickell.com. And if you haven't subscribed to the Happiness Hour YouTube channel, please check it out for sessions that you may have missed. Tonight's guest is Karin Saucedo. Karin is a Texas-based wildlife conservation photographer and a certified Texas naturalist. She gives her time to several wonderful conservation organizations as a volunteer, such as NSYNC Exotics. She's also on the advisory committee for the Texas Native Cats, and she's a partner photographer for Panthera. Her current project is documenting urban bobcats in the Dallas and Fort Worth area. If you're on Instagram, you can find her at Karin Saucedo, and you can connect with her through her website, karinsaucedo.com. In tonight's presentation, giving voice to wildcats and song dogs through storytelling, Karin will show how she began using her images and videos to encourage compassion and coexistence with the species that she's most passionate about. Karin is dedicated to making a difference in the lives of animals, whether they're wild or captive. She hopes to give them a voice. Welcome to the Happiness Hour, Karin.
Thank you so much, Linda.
I am so happy that you're here. I think I mentioned it off camera between the two of us. Wildlife photography, I'm very new to. It's an addiction, and it's slowly becoming an obsession. I'm catching myself planning my vacations around wildlife photography opportunities. But wildlife conservation is something very, very new to me. And I try to take every opportunity to learn from the people that have been doing it for a while. And you have been on my list and on my radar for a couple of years, but only like maybe last year I was like, I'm putting her on my wish list. So I'm super excited to have you here, and especially because you're in Texas and I'm in Texas, and it makes it a little bit, I don't know, it just means a little bit more tangible to me. So I'm really happy to have you.
I'm so honored to be here. You've had a lot of incredibly talented artists on here, and I'm just so honored that you thought of me and asked me to be a part. So thank you.
No, thank you. So I skimmed over your bio, and there's a lot of stuff on your website and on your about page. But what I kind of, grabbed a few things that I found interesting, but sometimes I missed something that maybe is more important to you. So if I have, feel free to take the opportunity to fill in the gaps.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me, Linda. This is such an honor. I am just going to dive in. So just as an introduction, I was born and raised in the Dallas area. I graduated from SMU, studied advertising and photography. I'm going into my 30th year in advertising and marketing as a photo producer. That is how I get my income. That's my income resource. Photography is just my passion. I do make a little bit of money, but it definitely does not replace my income in advertising, at least not right now. I got serious about wildlife photography in 2015, and specifically wildlife conservation photography. I just kind of jumped right in. I've been published in the Dallas Morning News, Outdoor Photographer, The Dodo, CNN, phys.org, science.org, ABC News, Deep in the Heart, the film by Ben Masters. I was honored to be in his book that accompanied the film. And then also Wild DFW. If you guys are in the DFW area and you don't know about this book, you should. It's amazing. It just came out. Amy Martin is the writer. She put she poured her heart and her soul into this book, and had been planning it for a number of years. And so I was honored to be a part of it. So I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for this amazing man. He's my husband, Robert Saucedo. He's normally with me when I'm doing this kind of thing. So this is literally the first time I'm doing a presentation about something I care about, not work related, solo. So we normally do everything together. Pretty much. We do divide and conquer at times, like tonight. But I do have to thank him and include him a little bit in this presentation, because I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for him. So just a little background on me. I've been around photography my entire life. You can see on the left, I'm playing with my dad's slides. He was a history professor, and so those are some outtakes, I think, from one of his lectures. I got a camera at a very early age, and you can see me and my sister with that Instamatic. That was my favorite, down there on the bottom right. And I've always loved cats, cats and dogs, but I was only allowed to have a cat growing up. So I love taking pictures of cats. That was my passion then, and it still is. They were pretty much all I took pictures of is cats. So in high school and college, I was fortunate enough to be able to study photography in high school. Not everybody does, and not everybody has that offered in high school. So I started learning. My dad taught me to use my first camera, so I knew a lot going into the classes. But this was my first 35mm camera that my dad gave me. And again, cats, dogs. That was my first dog. Were pretty much my only subject matter. Some of my early influences. I loved street photography, Henry Cartier-Bresson, The Decisive Moment, Robert Frank, just his incognito style of photography. Ansel Adams, oh my gosh, godfather of landscape photography. Elliot Erwitt and William Wegman, the dogs, of course. That's I was really drawn to William Wegman's work in the 70s, 80s. Joel Meyerowitz, his use of light really inspired me to look at light a different way, that it was okay to use artificial light, and then just his beautiful use of natural light. James Baylog, he introduced me to the Florida panther, and he did what Joel Sartori's doing with the photo arc he did back in the 90s. And really, I was always fascinated with endangered species and whatever I could do to help. And so James Baylog was a huge influence. He also shot the animals in captivity, but he used parts in the set as his art. Included that in his artwork. Art Wolf, he was everywhere. His cute animal photos were everywhere. Franz Lansing and Nickell, they were a huge inspiration to me with their Nat Geo work. And I've been able to meet almost half of these people, and at some point during my life. So they really kind of helped shape me, and they still influence me today. Also, one of my professors at SMU, he was a huge influence. Charlie Debus, he was very into classic photography, black and white photography. He actually developed a lot of Ansel Adams film for him. So I learned a lot about the zone system. Really amazing guy. I got to see one of his last shows, art shows, before he passed away. And then Deborah Hunter, I'm still friends with her on Facebook, and I just get goosebumps anytime she gives feedback on any of my posts. She was a huge influence, a little bit more modern. So I had a little bit of classic, a little bit of modern influence in my college days. And then my dad, he's been amazing. He's always teaching me, still teaching me, and I'm Just thankful to be able to spend time with them while I still can. So in the 2000s, before wildlife photography was my passion, travel photography was my passion. So I got to go to a lot of places. I grew up going to England a lot with my dad. He was a British history professor, so we did a lot of trips to England. So I just kind of grew up traveling. This was a trip before wildlife photography. I still was interested in wildlife, so I made sure we incorporated some pandas in that trip. But I was focused more on the people, the culture, rituals, the tradition, the history, food, beauty, but always looking for cats. And same with England. I wanted to go see the Sumatran tiger at the London Zoo. I'd never seen that species of tiger before. And it just really made an impact on me, and being able to photograph this beautiful animal and see them up close. That was just, that I was kind of like getting the bug to start shooting cats, more and more cats, and dogs. But it was just being able to shoot this beautiful animal. And after that trip, my husband encouraged me to spend a little bit more money, invest in myself, invest in our camera equipment. And I say our camera equipment because whatever I get, he's got to get too. So double the fun. NSYNC Exotics. This is where I really started to, I guess, improve my photography. I was able to use my camera just about every day I was out there. And these two tigers, Asha and Smuggler, I got to see them grow up there. They came to the sanctuary as little cubs. So I was obsessed with Asha and Smuggler. And so it was just a really, really great experience to be able to photograph these animals and also give them a voice. And it was at NSYNC that it just clicked, like, this is what I need to be doing. I need to be able to show these animals as who they are, what I'm seeing. Before they barely had a social media. NSYNC barely had a social media at the time when I first started. It was starting to grow, but being able to show these animals and their personalities and get people to fall in love with them, and donate to the cause was just really, it clicked with me. And that's what I wanted to do. And I just wanted to do more and more of it. So we started doing a calendar for NSYNC to raise funds. And I was just hooked. I was hooked on being able to go out and capture these animals and their personalities. This is Chloe. She had a little googly eye. And a wonky ear. She was a part of my first rescue at NSYNC. And it was incredibly emotional. There was a woman who passed away, and she had 20 big cats that had been living in squalor. And they didn't live that way all the time, but she was dying. She had cancer, and she had no plan in place for these cats. And she felt like if she gave up on the cats, she was giving up on herself. So she thought she could beat the cancer, but she was really, that the care for the cats was really lacking. So it was just sad to see. You saw on the property that little details where she cared at one time, and she was able to give them a lot of love and a lot of care, but not towards the end at all. And this was a lioness at the rescue, and this is the conditions they were living in. And this is one of those lionesses after living in NSYNC for a little while. So it was an incredibly emotional experience, and those cats, being able to care for them and give them a totally different life was so amazing. This is Lambert. Got to see him when he came in. A guy in Odessa bought Lambert when his kids bugged him about getting them a baby lion because they loved the Lion King. So he did. And then when he got to be about this age, he was a little bit too bitey. So he took him to NSYNC and surrendered him. And so got to see Lambert grow up into this beautiful, beautiful lion.
I think my dad wants to show you. I know this thing.
These guys were so incredible to see at that young age. These were mountain lion cubs from the state of Washington that were orphaned. Their mom was shot, so they came to live with us, and so we got to experience taking care of these tiny little cubs and watch them grow into beautiful adult mountain lions. And NSYNC doesn't breed, but we rescued 2 white tigers from South Texas. One of them was pregnant at the time. We didn't know it, and she gave birth at the sanctuary. So it was quite an experience. Our vet at the, we weren't prepared to take care of newborns. So it was a little bit of a learning curve, but it was cool to be able to see him grow up. And about the same, within a year, we got another tiger in from the border, the Texas border. You may have read about him. He was found in a duffel bag and they tried to bring him across the border into Texas. So this is Kenobi and Kylo Ren. Their enclosure is very Star Wars themed. But it's always best to have them grow up together with a buddy instead of alone. So we were so thankful to be able to have them grow up together. And they did. And it was so cool to be able to watch. So these are some of the calendars that we produced. My husband he's a creative director, so he's instrumental in the design of the calendar. And it's just been such a blessing to be able to do that for the cats. This is one of those stories that was published in the Dodo using my images, a local magazine. Melissa Grew, she's a huge mentor of mine. She encouraged me to write my first story for Outdoor Photographer, and it got published. And I was so excited to be able to share the story of the cats in a national magazine. So Gideon, he is a bobcat that came in as a cub. He had seizures, and a couple was keeping him as a pet until they decided they couldn't care for him anymore. They didn't know what to do because of the seizures. So they surrendered Gideon to us. So he was kind of a unique bobcat. And I hadn't spent much time with the bobcats until Gideon came along. And because he was a seizure bobcat, he had to have medication to control the seizures. So he was really chill for a bobcat. So it was a very unique experience to be able to spend so much time with a really calm bobcat. But it made me want to learn more about bobcats, because we had them living, they live in my backyard. They live in my own neighborhood. So at that point, I really wanted to learn more about bobcats. I wanted to learn more about wildlife in general, our native wildlife. So I started documenting the patterns of the different coat patterns of the bobcats at NSYNC, to show and to educate people. They're all different. They're different colors. They're different patterns. They're all unique. Like tiger's fingerprints are unique. I mean, tiger stripes are like fingerprints, and they're unique. So are the bobcats. They're stripes. They have stripes on their legs. This is on the right is a bobcat that was in my backyard, and then on the left is the same bobcat, but he was in a neighborhood across the street. So I was just showing our neighbors that it was the same one. But at that point, it got me wanting to learn more about more about nature, so I could tell stories better, so I can understand how we're all connected. So I became a Texas Master Naturalist. It's Texas Parks and Wildlife is, we basically were volunteered for Texas Parks and Wildlife. And I learned how we're all connected in so many ways, and how what we do impacts wildlife, impacts nature, impacts grass, soil. everything is connected. So I started volunteering at the Connemara Meadow Preserve, which is a nature reserve right down the street from my house. This was in 2015. I was so proud, so excited. The Connemara is a very special place. We learned a lot. I got to spend a lot of the different seasons, photographing different wildflowers out there, different wildlife. It's surrounded by Rowlett Creek, and the property used to be farmed like for centuries. And so the soil there is the soil quality is not the best. So there's a lot of erosion, a lot of flooding. The whole lower meadow pretty much gets flooded whenever it rains here. All of this water goes into the meadow. But it's a unique place. They're also doing bobwhite quail restoration in the meadow. So it's really cool to hear their calls. I got my first DSLR camera trap image of a bobcat in the meadow. This is a special quiet place called Narnia that we love to set camera traps in. But it was this girl. This is Alex. She was the coyote that really changed the course of our lives, really. A friend of ours told us about her and said they saw a sick coyote in the meadow, and we had to learn more. So this is the area where she was photographed. You can see that green dot. We talked to a neighbor who lived in this house right here. This is Rowlett Creek. He said that he's seen the coyotes coming through his by his house like just about every night. So they were coming every night because he was feeding them. He was putting all of his leftover food on this rock. We set up a camera over here. We wanted to learn more. We thought we could work with a rehabber and get her medicated. She had mange. So what we learned is it wasn't just her. It was this is Rocky, her mate that just walked by. This is a juvenile we named Chloe. And then this is Alex. She's up on the rock marking. And there was another one, another juvenile we named Layla. So all four of them were sick. So we spent a lot, my husband and I spent a lot of time researching, trying to understand what makes them sick, why are they sick, what can be done. So ultimately, we're able to get them medicated remotely without trapping, without removing them from their family members. And this is Chloe. This is Chloe in the summer on the left, and then Chloe in the winter on the right after she had been treated remotely for mange. And this is Rocky afterwards. He's in the switchgrass here. And this is Chloe again, just beautiful, healthy. And then this is Alex. So Alex was the breeding female. And even with treatment, she didn't really improve too much. And we find that a lot with the breeding females. They have so much stress. It takes a lot out of them, nursing and just trying to find a safe place for their pups, keep them all together. So we learned a lot. We still don't know exactly what is causing these animals to be sick. Rodenticide is a possibility, eating poison rats, contamination in the water sources, any number of things. I mean, anytime wildlife live close to people, there's a risk of them taking in all of our toxins that we put out.
Karin, can I ask a quick question? Susan wants to know, how did you treat the coyotes remotely?
So I'll go back and I'll show you this rock. So we had like 4 cameras here because they're not always reliable. So we had several cameras out. There was a driveway several yards away that we would just sit and hang out and wait until the coyotes came in the evenings. Because they would come every evening. This particular homeowner had trained them to come by that rock because there was maybe something waiting for them. And if there wasn't, they would mark it, because that's a part of their territory runs. They would run their territory just about every evening and mark it, especially during certain seasons. So we worked with a rehabber. We found a medication, and once they are medicated, it kills the mites. Like basically, mange and coyotes. This was sarcoptic mange that the rest of the family had. The mites. Normally, a healthy coyote can fight off the mites, and with these coyotes, they obviously something was wrong with their immune systems. The three others, they just needed a little kickstart, and they were fine afterwards. They recovered and they were great. But the breeding female, there was probably a little bit more. She was older, so there was probably more immune system issues that were going on. But we also so basically we put the medication out. It's a palatable. And so we waited for them to get it. And if they didn't come by, we'd pick it up. So it was just a very, very controlled circumstance. There's a mange team here in the DFW area. It's called DFW Wildlife Coalition. Several members of that, several volunteers are rehabbers, and they work with the community to help coyotes with mange. Again, remotely. So coyotes are like us, like family is so important to them. So removing one out of the family is just devastating, and it can sometimes end in death of the pups, or even the mate. They love each other so much, and they're so closely bonded. So does that answer your question? It's every situation is so different. So you really have to do a lot of research, trying to figure out a pattern, and just some situations you're just not able to.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so this is the house where we were able to medicate the coyotes. This was their territory at the time in the green. This is the area now. So it's mostly houses. And that's going on everywhere, at least in Texas. It's everywhere. There's so much development. So these guys are now restricted to this area. They can, if they want, they can go into the houses, but it's really important. That's why education is really important on reducing conflict with coyotes. We don't want to give them a reason to go into these neighborhoods and just hang out. So that just kind of gives you an idea of where we were. This is a new pair that moved in 2017. And we saw this and we're like, who is that? And it's a new young pair we named Boris and Natasha. And they actually pushed out the other coyotes, and they took over this territory basically. And this behavior, this is in December. This is kind of courting behavior. And this is also in December. This is the first and only time that I saw Boris in person. So he and Natasha were basically just checking out the area and marking it, and I never saw him in person again. This is Natasha in her prime. She's marking here. In the winter, they do a lot of territorial marking because they're getting ready for breeding season. And she's in the bathroom. That's how they mark sometimes. And then Boris comes along. So you can see what he looks like in his prime. He also had a little patch of fur missing on his back from scratching. So it's the beginning of mange, but a lot of the males, like he's a big male. He's a super healthy. That just lasted a month or so, and the fur grew back. So he wasn't really impacted and didn't need treatment. So we saw one of their pups the next season, and he was just so sick, and he was incredibly lethargic. The other pups were just like took off when they saw us. This pup just laid in the grass, and we got him to a rehabber, but it was too late. So he must have been, the run. They don't all survive. There were 3 that survived, and then this little guy that didn't make it. So we buried him in the meadow. But we learned a lot in the process. It's the first time we'd ever seen a baby coyote before. This was early June. And this is a unique video of Natasha and her pups in 2020. It was really cool to see this. And we'd seen pups before, and we've seen Natasha, but not all of them together. So it was a really cool moment. By this time, we had maybe 20 cameras in the Connemara area. And this is one of the last times we saw Natasha. So she's about to give birth, and she's really sick with mange. So it's awesome to be able to see the generations of coyotes. There's a new generation that's moved in. And actually, this is Boris right here running with his son and the new breeding female. And it's really cool to see that, and to know that they're still really, really elusive. They don't go into the neighborhoods. And Boris is about 9 years old now, and he's teaching his offspring and their offspring how to survive. He's teaching them his survival skills. And that's what's so important and so rare in the cities and suburbs these days, because the breeding coyotes get randomly killed. Homeowners just shoot them, kill them. It's all kinds of, deaths because of us. But when we're killing those elders, those older coyotes, we're killing off that knowledge. So younger coyotes are breeding, successfully breeding, but they don't have the experience. So those are the ones that get in trouble. They kind of push the boundaries. We'll get more into that in a little bit. So my current influences, after spending so much time with, learning about nature, and I started to gravitate to different types of photographers that focused on different wildlife. Sebastian Kinnerknecht, he's a really good friend of mine. He's also been a mentor. He taught me how to use a DSLR camera trap. Amy Shutt, she's been such a great friend and mentor. She's incredibly talented. She's a canine freak as well. Melissa Grew, she's amazing. Susie Esterhaas, Peter Mather. If you don't know his work, he has this awesome series of ice bears that's just so cool. These bears that stay out a little bit longer in the season, and so for the salmon, and they walk around with ice. It's so cool. He's so incredibly talented. Morgan Heim, Clay Bolt, Doug Gemsey, Christian Ziegler, Jaime Rojo, and Karen Igner. These guys are all incredibly talented. So their work just is constantly pushing the boundaries, and is so aspirational to me. So once I got comfortable with my camera and shooting wildlife, or wild animals, I wanted to go to India. That was the first thing I wanted to do, was see tigers in the wild. So I planned a trip, and it was incredible. This is probably one of my favorite images, just because it was something I had imagined that I wanted to shoot, and it just happened. We waited a while, but it happened. And actually, this tiger here, he was called Cowboy, or T91. A few months later after this was in 2017, he got moved over to another reserve, another tiger reserve. The only male there for a while, and then they eventually brought over a female. And that's a kind of relocating tigers is kind of a controversial topic in India. Doesn't always work out well. He ended up dying a few years later. And so did the female. So it's just not necessarily been 100% successful. when we intervene and we transfer who we think we should go over there. They do migrate over there naturally, and they do that successfully, but it's a very controversial thing that I learned about visiting India. India relies on tourism, tiger tourism, and the future of tigers really relies on tourism as well. Ranthambore National Park is where I visited. It's incredibly packed with tigers. It's about 70, I think. And so they're constantly fighting for territory as the cubs get older. This little guy here, he as he got older, he had really defined blue eyes. He ended up fighting with a bigger male as he grew up, and just really struggled to find a territory of his own. And he got pushed out to the outskirts, and he ended up killing 3 people in a period of 2 months. So they captured him, and he now lives in a sanctuary. So it's great because tigers reproduce really well, but they're constantly getting killed. They're constantly, there's constant conflict with humans in such a crowded area. This was probably my most favorite wildlife experience ever. We got to spend one-on-one time with this tiger, Krishna. She's the daughter of the famous Machli. I don't know if you guys have seen the film about her. Her mom, she was a really famous tiger that lived in Ranthambore. She lived to a very old age. But this is Krishna, her daughter. And it was just such an intimate time that we had with her. We were in 2 vehicles, 4 people per vehicle. It was just so quiet. She was resting in the water, super relaxed, super calm. This was what it was like. This is how close we were to her. We shut off the engines, and it was just so peaceful and just such a rare experience. And we saw later that she had a little secret. So she was nursing, and so she had newborn cubs that she was hiding and just taking a little mommy break. And a few weeks after we got back to the States, she finally made her appearance with her cubs. But it was cool that we got to see that. The Pantanal, I planned a trip. Actually, I didn't plan it. My friend planned it and convinced me to go with her. So I got to go to the Pantanal and experience the most diverse wildlife just right there up in your face. It's just so amazing. The jaguars are like the tigers. The tigers are habituated to people in jeeps. But once you get out of that jeep, or once you get out of this boat, you're considered prey, basically. So the jaguars are habituated to the boats. And they just go about their business, hunting, doing whatever. So it was a really unique experience. This is Juru. He's very charismatic jaguar. And these guys are massive. They are huge cats. They're very different than the jaguars of Mexico, or even the jaguars that used to live in Texas. They were a little bit smaller, but these guys are just massive. They're huge down there. This is Juru again. He was trying to get to a family of capybaras, which are a large rodent. And he missed, but he ended up getting a monkey instead. And this experience was probably way up there too. Being able to see an ocelot in the wild was just a dream come true. This wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for the fires. We went in the dry season in Brazil. Being able to see the cats is a lot easier in the dry season because they come to the water, they come down to the water. But the firefighters were looking at some smoke and they were looking to see where it was coming from, and they noticed this ocelot in the brush. And so they alerted us, and we were able to see this beautiful ocelot. And it was really difficult to get a sharp image because you're in the water and the boat is moving and you're holding a long lens. So it was it was a struggle, but I was determined to get a decent shot of this beautiful cat. In Spain, I went with my friend Sebastian Kenner Connect to Spain on a kind of a scouting trip. He took a few people that he knew and trusted because we may or may not be able to see an Iberian lynx. And we knew the risk. We knew we might not see one at all. It was a 10-day trip. And it was amazing that I would have been thrilled if we didn't see one. The food was so good. Spain is amazing. We did end up seeing a lynx. It was a lot more standing around and looking at birds and other wildlife, and a lot less lynx, but we did end up seeing 2 really great sightings during that trip. Saw evidence of lynx. They're very much like our bobcats, but they have a more specialized diet and they really rely on these rabbits. And so part of the trip, or a part of the lynx conservation is rabbit conservation. So this is a man-made kind of a hole or entryway burrow for the rabbit. And so a lot of properties have this that are trying to help conserve the lynx. And part of our trip was to create a rabbit warren ourselves on the property, and it was a really unique experience because we were contributing to the Iberian lynx conservation. So I got involved with Panthera when I went to Brazil, but several years before that, I got to meet Alan Rabinowitz. He was the co-founder of Panthera, and had been a huge inspiration to me. And I got to know him. We exchanged a few emails. And one of the things he said to me, I don't remember, I'm not going to be able to quote it, but it really inspires me when I feel like I need to give up and it's just not worth it. He said, you just need to plant seeds into people's psyche and make them think about something they saw or heard. And then that's when you start to make a difference, is when you just change one person's mind. It just takes one person at a time. And that really hit me because I'm, trying to get published in these national magazines, and there's a lot of rejection, and I just feel like I'm not making a difference. It's so not worth it. But that got me thinking I can make a difference in my own town, my own neighborhood, my own street. Part of the trip to Brazil, we stayed on the Panthera's ranch in Brazil, and Alan was supposed to be on this trip actually, but he passed away just shortly before the trip. But Howard Quigley, another leader, a big cat conservation leader, was on the trip as well, and we learned a lot from Howard. He was just so incredibly knowledgeable about cats. And this moment here was really special. We were on the beach. It was towards the end of the trip. We had a magical day of sightings, and we didn't know it, but this jaguar was watching us the whole time, just appeared out of nowhere. And we all kind of got this feeling like, wow, this is like Alan had something to do with this. It was just a cool experience. And last year, unfortunately, Howard passed away as well. So we lost 2 really amazing big cat conservationists. But because of Howard, I was able to be a Panthera partner photographer. So they use my images for their conservation efforts. And in fact, they asked me to do a blog about photographing Texas bobcats. But it's just been really cool to be able to contribute to their work. They are an amazing organization. The Canid Project. So Amy Shutt, the photographer I told you guys about before, she started the Canid Project, and my husband and I started working really closely with Amy once I found out that Wildlife Services, a government agency, was getting involved in our coyotes in my own city, they were hired to kill and eliminate coyotes. So that just really bothered me. So I worked together with Amy. Robert and I came up with this coyote coexistence plan specific to our Texas and Louisiana coyotes. And it's a template based on the Humane Society's coexistence and management plan. And we just customize it. That's what it's designed to do. It's just a template, and we inserted our own customized photos, diet, characteristics, everything specific to our coyotes. And so we started sharing this with different municipalities, and some of them have put it into place, including the city of Dallas. Amy and I we try to make an effort every year to go look for coyotes. We kind of meet halfway, look for coyotes. Sometimes we see them, sometimes we don't. Sometimes they see us and we don't even know it. And we still don't see them, but my husband was able to see this coyote. Lots of tracks. I learned a lot with Amy. We just could go for weeks just looking at tracks and scat and learning about them. This is a scrape and basically a territorial mark here. Finally, I saw a coyote with Amy. Through the Canid project, I got involved with researchers who were studying coyotes. And on the top left, you'll see a blood sample from a living coyote. And then on the top right, that's a liver and tissue sample from a deceased coyote. So they're studying the genetics of coyotes in Texas and Louisiana, all over really, but they're really focused on Texas and Louisiana. And it's really cool because I've contributed to some of their studies. Anytime I see a roadkill coyote, I'll get a tissue sample and send it up to them at Princeton University. And it's about half and half. Some of our coyotes are 100% coyote in the Dallas area, and then some of them are, 10, 11, 12% red wolf. They have red wolf genetics in them. It doesn't mean they're a red wolf. It doesn't mean they're a hybrid. They just have some red wolf ancestry in them. So it's been really a great learning experience. I got to go into the field with them and document some of their work as they trap and collar, get blood and blood samples of these coyotes. And I learned how to age a coyote more or less through their teeth. They take detailed measurements. I love the way he's looking into this researcher's eyes. Coyotes shut down when they're captured. Most of them, they shut down. Unlike cats or bobcats, they go crazy. They fight back, but coyotes shut down. And so few people know that. They think if someone finds a coyote in a trap, they think something's wrong with them because they're so shut down, but that's their nature. This is Amy setting a camera trap. This is one of the coyotes. His eyes were so amazing. They're white and they reflect the blue in the sky. At the time it was really cloudy, so its eyes were more white here. These animals are so cool. These particular animals have a lot higher red wolf ancestry in them. And this is one of the coyotes being released. And these are some of the articles that have been published with my images regarding this research. It's been really cool to see. So after the pandemic, when the pandemic started, my mom got really sick actually after I went to the Pantanal. And so there was a time when I really didn't want to go anywhere, didn't want to do anything, and wanted to spend time with my mom. She ended up passing away. So it was a really difficult time and really difficult for me to pick up photography again. So I got involved with a lot of local issues, and travel was not on my radar. Still kind of isn't on my radar these days. I'm more focused on local efforts. But the DFW Wildlife Coalition and the North Texas Wildlife Center are two organizations I'm involved with here locally. Before they came along, Robert and I got involved with coyote outreach and education, just kind of on our own, like underground kind of. And we would talk to neighbors and neighborhoods, but we weren't like an organization, or we weren't affiliated with one. We were just photographers. So it wasn't until we connected with these larger organizations that we got to really get serious and do some presentations and start educating people. But this was Hope. We got to follow her for over a year or so. She had mange, and she was another breeding female that struggled to get better 100%. But you can see these are persimmons on the ground that she's eating. So anytime a persimmon tree drops its fruit, you're going to probably see all kinds of animals because they love them. Here she is drinking water in the middle of the street. We learned a lot from her. We learned a lot about coyote behavior in the suburbs. She would just be sitting on people's, in people's yards in a little ball, totally blended in. And we would just watch for hours as people just walked by and had no idea she was there most of the time. If they had dogs with them, they knew she was there. And she got up and walked away whenever dogs came by. She was more afraid of the dogs than the people. But we learned a lot from Hope. Tony Hawk was another coyote that someone told us about. He was in this sports complex near a library. Not aggressive, he's just looking very sick. So Robert and I wanted to go find Tony Hawk, and it's like a needle in a haystack. And this is an example of we don't just walk up to wildlife, especially coyotes and bobcats. We don't ever want to habituate them. Anytime we're photographing them, we're hidden, or most of the time we're in our cars, using our cars as a blind. But we take that very, very seriously. We don't want them. We even upgraded our camera equipment to silent shutter, mirrorless system, so that we didn't have a sound associated with what we were doing. So we didn't want to interrupt them or even let them know that we're around. So this is an example of we think we're hidden, we're not really, but this shot wasn't that great. So we moved over to another area and parked our car and got a better shot of him. We finally figured out a way to medicate him. He had a family, he had young cubs, and this is him after he got medicated. So he's not relapsed at all in all the years we've been photographing him. This particular area is kind of a rendezvous site, is what it's called. It's an area where coyotes leave their young when they're old enough to kind of, after they come out of the den and they start wandering around, they leave the young coyotes there for longer periods of time where they go off and hunt. And so it's usually a field adjacent to a green space where they can hide. They can go out in the field if they want to and look for bugs and play, but they can also go hide in the brush and the tree line. So this is an example of us in our car being able to just watch this coyote, and he's listening here. This is before we upgraded our equipment. You can hear the shutter going off, but you can see him listening. I don't know what he was listening to, but it was really cool to see. But that's the field. And there's houses back there. Just sitting there. Nobody knows he's there. Nobody would know he's there. This is probably the first time I turned on my video on my camera. Because this behavior you can't really capture in a still image. And we didn't know what was going on at the time until afterwards. So he's actually feeding them, and he's regurgitating food right there. So they eat the regurgitated food. They want more. He's struggling because he's got an injury. So he's a little extra grumpy too, but he had no use of one of his legs basically. And that went on for a couple of seasons, but now he's back to using it again. He still favors it a little bit, but we learned at this time, we thought, oh, we've got to capture him, get him to a rehabber. But if we had removed him to help him with his leg, those coyotes, the coyote pups would have died because their mom was on a mommy break too. And we would see her in another neighborhood early in the mornings when we would drive out to this area, but she just wasn't. We had several cameras in this area too. She just took off. But then she came back after maybe 3 weeks or so. But that was just a perfect example of how great coyote fathers are. And he was just so incredibly loyal and dedicated. Super grumpy. But it was just a really cool experience. So baby Cody was a little coyote that we learned about. He was actually Hope, the first coyote story, Hope's son. And this little green space was just a tiny little area in a neighborhood with a hospital behind it. And we learned that people were feeding Cody a lot of food. So we try to get them to stop feeding him. That's what was keeping him there. And he needed to go off and be with his family and learn from his family, but they insisted. And sometimes you just can't get people to understand that it's not good for them. The Cody had mange also. He had a belly full of worms. A lot of coyotes have hookworms. But we were able to medicate him remotely. That's a situation where the feeding station where he was used to coming, it was just super easy to medicate him because he was used to coming to the station. But the idea is that you remove the food. Once they're medicated, take away the food and let them go do their thing. But this family didn't. They kept feeding him. His belly was always full. And so he didn't have a reason to leave. And we learned that he just didn't show up anymore. He was there every single day, didn't show up anymore. And animal control confirmed that they found his body a few houses over in the bushes. So he had gotten a poison rat. We saw him eating a rat in this photo back here. We saw him eating a rat. And then a week or so later confirmed that he had died. So he was probably maybe 10 pounds or so, and a large rat with that much poison in him would cause him to die. This is Sophie. She's a blind coyote. And you can see my husband could walk right up to her. It was another unique experience. She was spending a lot of time in a community that was kind of a townhouses with the courtyard. So she was spending a lot of time in that courtyard because maybe 5 or 6 different people were feeding her. We thought, wow, she needs to be taken to a rehab. She couldn't see anything. But also we learned that's probably not a good idea. She was pregnant. That would have been a disaster to have a rehabber not only take on caring for an adult coyote, but then also her pups. It just would have been a drain on resources. But coyotes are incredibly resilient. She came back. She disappeared for a while she had her cubs, and she came back much thinner. And so that just confirmed it's best to leave them alone and let them do their thing. But we also convinced everybody to stop feeding her, so she stopped coming around, believe it or not. And this also was where I picked up my video for the first time in a while. And I'm still learning video, and I need to get more comfortable with it. because there's just so much you can capture that you can't capture with a still image. It was just amazing just to be there without her knowing that we were there, to be able to document her. So drain spout bobcats are a thing here in the Dallas area. We have a lot of bobcats with different plastic, they're like, they redirect the water from your gutters, and they're just super cheap things that you can buy at Home Depot or whatever. But if they're not secured, they blow away in the wind, and a rodent can pop in one. And if a cat is trying to get the rodent, they'll get stuck in one of these things. A friend of mine, she rescues cats. She just trapped a domestic cat with one of these things around its neck, and she saved it for me, so I get to go check it out. But this particular cat, I've been following her for maybe a year and a half or so, and started out when she was just 9 months old. She got stuck in this trap. So she got stuck in it at a very, very early age, and she's had 3 litters of kittens, and it's just been so cool. At first I thought, oh, we need to trap her. So I had a dog rescue friend let me borrow some of her traps and cell cameras. And so the community was more than willing to help and let us put up traps and try to trap her. But she walked by several times, and the last time she walked by, I could tell that she was pregnant. So I was like, we can't trap her. We can't intervene. We've got to let her do her thing. So she's had several litters, and she's still hunting. She's not getting into trouble. And so I think intervening is not ideal in this situation. I think if she was sick and deteriorating, it would be one thing, but this doesn't seem to be impacting her. It looks terrible, but it's also falling apart as well. It's pieces of it are coming off. So I'm still monitoring her. I'm still getting sightings. This is one of the few times I actually saw her in person. She's so elusive. A lot of neighbors have seen her. In fact, one neighbor saw her and the kittens in her yard, and she let them stay for about 3 weeks, and then she just freaked out. And so she hazed the family, and they moved on. This is a closer shot of her. They moved on, but one of her kittens ended up in another guy's yard, and it was, he let me know about the kittens. He let me put up camera traps to see if mom was still around. That was the number one thing. We wanted to make sure mom was caring for this kitten. But as I was checking the cameras, like the first day I saw him, I saw this kitten, and I was just torn. I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to kidnap him without knowing if mom was caring for him. Then I've got a baby bobcat that I've got to get to a rehabber. And it's so much better with their mom. He's got such a better chance with his mom than with a rehabber. Rehabbers are amazing, but it's just ideal to be with mom. So it was a hard choice. I let him go. This is the video that I got that I'm gonna watch later. And I don't think you guys can hear this. Can you hear it?
I could hear a little bit of it. Yeah.
So he was screaming. Basically, he was calling for mom. It sounded like a bird chirp. But it just broke my heart. And I knew he had been wandering around for 24 hours or so without mom. So my only hope is that when he was wandering around, I saw him cut through several yards, and he went into a major area that has a drain, and he was screaming. That sound was going into the drain. Bobcats up here use the storm drain systems to get around. And there was a sighting of the mom that day, a few streets over, but that sound carries through the drain. So I just have to hope that she heard him Bobcat moms are super loyal, so I have no doubt that they reconnected. I have to believe that. This is another bobcat that has a plastic drain spout stuck around her neck. She was pretty much on her deathbed here. She had mange. We weren't able to trap her successfully, and she ended up dying. But I've shared this information with Texas Parks and Wildlife, and several different organizations have been able to share. Basically, it's a litter awareness message to be careful of the things that you buy, the home improvement items, because they could end up out there stuck on a cat, impacting them. And Mishka, this is a coyote pup that I have had the pleasure of documenting. She's blind, and this is her rehabber that's been caring for her. And I got to go on a couple of different doctor appointments with this coyote. She has a very different temperament because she can't see, so she's not as scared as a coyote that would be able to see everything. She was very patient as they did tests on her. She got a little scared with that light. But it was just a really cool experience. And these are just some other photos of coyotes and bobcats that I've been able to see, not full stories, but this was a coyote that was shot by a neighbor in this neighborhood. They were tired of his stories on Facebook and then on Nextdoor, and so a neighbor just took it upon himself to be the hero and kill this poor coyote pup that was suffering with mange. Once the neighbors found out he wasn't quite the hero, they were really angry with him. It was just a really, really sad story that happened earlier this year. This is a kitten in rehab. She doesn't even have her eyes open yet, but it was just so cool to be able to see this rehabber take care of this kitten as she grows up. And I use this a lot to show people who think that they have bobcat kittens, that they have these white spots. They're not always super defined, but they're born with them, and they also are born with the short tail and a little bit of white on the tail. This is a coyote in a neighborhood down the street. He was limping for a little while and just taking shelter in that neighborhood. And I started working with Project Coyote and have been sharing my images with them to use for coexistence messaging. And they have a really cool program called Capture Coexistence. And so if you have coyote photos, they would love to work with you and share the message of coexistence. This was a neighbor that had coyote pups in their backyard, and we put up a camera, and there's a lot of coyote pups in that yard. This is a really unique experience. This is an example where it's a young mom, probably breeding sooner than she would naturally, or something might have happened to her parents. So she's a really young mom. Young moms who've had parents that are killed tend to have larger litters. This little guy was left behind. He was scared, he was alone. And I don't know if you could hear that or not. My dog certainly did. But he was screaming to the top of his lungs. And then less than an hour later, mom showed up. So she was probably not too far by, but she could definitely hear his call, his voice. So it was just a unique experience to be able to show this homeowner how coyotes are using that den, that deck as a den area. And so it's great if he has neighbors that appreciate them too, but they don't. And so he's going to have that den sealed before another family moves in. So kind of a turning point in my life last year. It was a point where I just purposefully put down my camera and was really, really angry, frustrated, and knew how to do more with my images and with all of the content I've gathered of coyotes over the years. I don't know if you guys heard the story of the coyote attack in the Lake Highlands area, White Rock Valley. It's the area where I grew up, and my dad still lives there, so I was spending a lot of time there. There's a lot of construction too. It's an older neighborhood by a lake, by White Rock Lake. It's a huge lake, lots of natural habitat, but also a lot of construction as well. So they're with that natural habitat, they're putting in houses and apartments and just more construction in an already congested area. And so they were seeing a lot of coyote conflict. And these blue ribbons that were in this tree represent a little boy who ended up in the hospital because of a coyote. The neighborhood really came together after this incident happened. These two little boys were on a front porch, a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old, and their mom was inside. And the coyote the mom was in the den. The coyote mom was in the den occupied with her pups. It was in early May. And so this teenage coyote was just running around the neighborhood, finding all kinds of food resources. These peacocks have been in my neighborhood since I was a little girl. There's just a plethora of food resources in this neighborhood. People were feeding animals, feeding wildlife. And so this coyote was just running amok. And nobody really knew how to deal with it. Nobody knew how to, they didn't want to change their lifestyle. They didn't want to change feeding the animals. So this unfortunate incident happened. This is the coyote. I was actually studying him and saw the increase, the change in his behavior. He was coming around. This is my dad's walkway. So he was coming around at dawn and dusk in the beginning, but then he started coming in random periods of time, at noon, at 1, 2 in the afternoon. And once I heard about a neighbor said that her nanny saw the coyote while she was had the stroller. They were taking the kids for a walk. She saw the coyote and she tossed food to it to try to deter it, to try to get it to stay away from them. But that was probably the beginning of the end for this coyote, because throwing food at a coyote, they're looking at you like a food resource. So they're gonna quickly become habituated to people. If you're gonna toss food at them, maybe somebody else will. You have a stroller equals food, snacks, milk, yum. So unfortunately, this coyote and the rest of his family was killed by wildlife services. When I found out about the neighbor that that threw food at the coyote, I called Parks and Wildlife to try to get them to come to the school to give a talk, because they weren't listening to me. I was just, a neighbor. But I thought maybe it was somebody with a badge would be able to make a difference, but they were really busy. So they didn't. And then this incident happened. And so they killed all these coyotes. This is a neighbor's ring footage of this coyote. He came to this front porch because there was a Uber Eats bag that had been there for hours because it was delivered to the wrong address. But it just shows that they're not naturally comfortable coming up on a front porch, but when there's food there, they're gonna maybe take a chance, depending on the coyote and the personality. So it was a really big learning experience and forced me to put away my camera, stop all of that and really get serious about education and trying to talk to people about coexistence with wildlife. So what's next? You guys are kind of the first to know about this. Song Dog Watch is a project that my husband and I are going to start. Not sure what it's going to look like just yet, but we're hopeful that it's going to help make a difference. It's in the way beginning stages. There are 5 coyote pups that are in rehab right now with a rehabber that has really limited resources. So we're hoping that something like our organization could be able to help fund things like that. I recently got sub-permitted to be able to transport wildlife and help care for wildlife when needed. I don't have the capacity to rehab animals, but if one is and needs a place to land and be cared for a little while, I can do that. This is our inspiration for Song Dog Watch. This is Boris, as he's calling out for Natasha. And that's how we got the logo. That's Boris. The end. How you can connect with me. I've got on this other slide, I'll share a QR code. This will take you to a web page that has a lot of resources when we do our coyote presentations. Just a quick way to be able to access that. And Linda, I can share that link with you.
That would be great. I'd love that. There was a comment and I'm going to share the chat with you, but and I'm going to repeat it and kind of piggyback on the comment, but your heart just must burst. You can tell, I can tell when people love what they're doing, and I can tell when people are passionate about what they care about. And you certainly have embraced from a very young age to today, you've stayed the course. And I love the fact that you and your husband have started something. And I like the idea that you don't know where it's going yet, but I do hope that maybe when that gets legs and I'm still doing this, I hope that you've come back and shared that with us, because I think that would be a wonderful, wonderful story to hear how this goes for you in the next few years. I was looking, there were a lot of nice comments. I don't know that there are any more questions here. Sue is also saying, I'm anxious to see more about Song Dog. So that's great. So let's see, there's something in here. All right. It's from Brianne. She says, hi, first, you're amazing. And I'm always in such admiration of your work. It's so important. As far as wildlife tourism and conservation goes, where do you stand on the subject? And do you think wildlife tourism can be sustainable in both keeping locals more amenable and tourists educated? That was a lot of words. Can you? Yeah.
Well, I think so if it's done correctly, and ethically. In the Pantanal, we saw a lot of tour boats that were keeping the jaguars from being able to cross the river because they wanted the people on their boat that they were hosting, they wanted them to be able to get a great shot. So it put that animal's life at risk, basically. So I think if it's done ethically, and then Pantanal, the Panthera is really involved in those ethics and keeping those tour guides in line, which is really cool to see. But in like Spain, for example, our tour guide, Sebastian, had to get people to let this lynx cross the road because everybody was like kind of crowding him and putting pressure on the cat. So I think there does have to be a lot of oversight in the ethics.
Okay. She's just a second question. How can the average person find ethical wildlife tourism? Are there some red flags that you could share with us, point out in your experience?
Yeah, I think, coming from the big cat background, if you have an opportunity to walk with lions, to feed lions, feed baby cubs, that's so wrong. And it is very disheartening. A friend of ours recently went on a trip to Thailand, and he's known about our work and our just the ethics and issues. And we saw that he went to a tourism place where the tigers were drugged, adult tigers, and so they got photos with them. So it was just like, oh no, they haven't listened at all to anything. So it was kind of frustrating. But the red flags are, if well, back when Joe Exotic days, when he was running his business, he had a big sign out on one of his exhibits, trying to get people to give him money because he was trying to bring back the liger. So he was calling it liger conservation, and people were falling for it. That's just like not natural. Like a lion and a tiger, he was trying to bring back the saber-toothed tiger or something crazy. So that's kind of a red flag. But anytime you have an opportunity to hold or pet a baby animal from money, that's a bad sign, red flag.
Yeah. Okay. All right, Karin, that was a lot of information, a lot of beautiful photos, but what I got more out of it with stories. I think something you said earlier, one of your mentors said, if you could just drop something a seed, and someone grabs it, it's awareness. And I am that person. I have become friends with quite a few wildlife photographers, and just being around them and looking at the photos that they post and the stories they tell, even though I've not experienced those animals myself, it's just those little seeds that hopefully, if I get an opportunity, I can educate the next person that's curious. And so I hope that you don't give up and you keep, doing the good fight, because you are doing some wonderful work. And that helps these animals in the long run. It's to hear your friend has had that experience, it's very disheartening, and you feel like, oh, your messages weren't heard. But there will be somebody that hears them a different way, and they'll learn from that. So keep going. So we need more people like you in our world. So I want to thank you for coming and sharing what you know and what you love. And this was such a beautiful presentation. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Linda, for having me.
You bet. All right. If you're on Instagram, you can find Karin at Karin Saucedo, and you can connect with her through her website, karinsaucedo.com. And I will link those in the show notes so that you can just hit a button and get straight to her website. Next week, landscape photographer Ryan Oswald will be here to present Unraveling the World of Color Theory. Until next time, go out and create something beautiful. And I hope that we see you again soon.